HO scale model railroaders, part 3 of if you can't buy it, build it. I've got this millie put on the shell. I did it yesterday, let it dry overnight. And I had this loco here has had a lot of bad luck. I have an LED underneath the cab. The wire broke loose and I was soldering the wire and it dripped and it came through the roof. So I mixed up some of this millie put, and this right here I've had this for a long time, and I noticed that this is really crusty on the outside, and next time I use this I'm going to trim off the outside edge because this crust did not break down very well. But the yellow part is just fine. There's no crust on that. So next time I use this, if you happen to have some, just trim off the outside crust because it didn't work very well. And then I like to make cut pieces of wood and I glue sandpaper to them. And this one right here I wrapped around, but sometimes you can just cut off the sandpaper so you don't have a corner you're going to use. If you don't want to rub up against something with sandpaper and you're sanding, just trim it to match the wood. And then I have this real big one here. Like when I sanded this down, I used that big one. So when I'm working on some other projects too, and this one here, when I mixed up some of this putty, I went ahead and I did some areas I thought needed a little bit more. See right there in that corner, and then I did where the lights were, and I had a scratch up there. And then sometimes I get in a rush and I do things and I make mistakes, like this one here. For some reason I didn't do the grab irons before I put the handrails on, and I put the holes in the wrong location on that, so I had to fill that. So that's something else I'm working on. I made a mistake down here. So I'm working on that, working on the Santa Fe, and then I'm working on this, and you can see it isn't quite right, so I could sand that again. And I do have an airbrush, but I've learned how to paint. You could paint small areas, like I just got done painting the roof. What you do is, if you happen to have some airbrush paint mixed up, some acrylic where you can add water, make your airbrush paint. And then I use distilled water and fill a cap full of water. And if the paint isn't thin enough, go ahead and put the brush in the water and then put it in the paint. And you start at an area and you just gradually do the whole area. Don't leave any strokes. It'll fill in if it's fluid enough. You fill in the whole area. Don't put it on too heavy. You don't want any runs. And then when it dries, it isn't too bad. Because you can hide a lot with this dull coat. You can hide a lot of the imperfections. So anyway, when I put this putty on, I have one of these hobby knives, but I like to use a utility blade without the knife, just the blade, and I can hold it. And and you want to have some water. You want to have a little container of water when you're doing this. I couldn't video this while I did it. It's just impossible. So you put the putty on, and you add water to the putty to make the consistency you want. And then to keep the putty from sticking to the blade, you want to have a wet rag. You wipe off the blade, and then you dip it in water. Once you dip that in water, that putty won't stick to the blade, and then you can work that putty, and it won't stick to the blade. And here's the front. I put a piece of plastic down the center of it. So that's supposed to match the contour of the back. And it's the same size piece of plastic that matches the same measurement of the center of the back. So I put that in there. And it may not be right, but when I sand it, I'm going to determine when to stop sanding it. And if I need to add more putty to it, I'll add more putty to it. But this is basically the rough start. And this putty, if it sticks, you get it someplace you don't want it, It's not really that hard. You just take a toothpick. It'll scrape right off. See, you take a sharp toothpick with a point on it. You scrape it off, and if you're really good, you could take a razor blade. Whoops. You could take a razor blade and scrape. This stuff will cut. This stuff cuts pretty easily. Just like that. Just be careful and gentle and trim it, that you don't scratch the plastic. So anyway, that's just the gist of it, you know. And then there's that mistake I made. And when I sand that, if I need to add more putty to that, I'll add more. So this is a B30-7A that being used cabless unit. So I couldn't find one available on eBay, and the Northwest Pacific doesn't make the shell anymore. So I decided to go ahead and make one with a Atlas B30-7. Okay? Thank you.